The National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago proudly presents Making a Difference in Our Economic Space. Good evening. Welcome to Making a Difference, where we examine communities, organizations, and individuals who are making a positive difference in our lives. I'm your host, Felipe Noguera. Tonight, in our first segment, Our Energy, Our Future, we speak with Kendall Lindsay, manager of the Liquid Fuel Caroni facility at NGC. This segment's brought to you with the kind compliments of our platinum sponsors, the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago. In our second segment, Caribbean Economic Forum, we look at the local entertainment industry and how it can generate employment and national income in a conversation with Stephen Howard. We also speak with Sister Folade Mutota, who is the executive director of the Women's Institute for Alternative Development, and she's going to talk about the United Nations Arms Trade Treaty that CARICOM is hosting in the month of August. We also continue a discussion of economic diversification, examining the role of integrated medicine in national public health policy. Making a Difference is joined by Dr. Enrico Melson, MD, by Skype from Los Angeles, California, and David Frazier, looking at the potential economic impact of such a policy in Trinidad and Tobago. In our Community Voices segment, we also speak with members of the Rampanalgas community further east about the challenges facing the community in that part of Trinidad and what they're doing to overcome them. Finally, we visit Caribbean icons Norman Washington Manley. We conclude the show with Caribbean cultural icon Bob Marley at the Amandla Festival of Unity at Harvard Stadium in 1979. His message of loving solidarity with then oppressed people in Southern Africa and the sufferers in the ghetto is especially poignant in the song Roadblock. Please stay with us for a most informative program. We'll be right back. For nearly 4 decades, the National Gas Company has been using our natural gas resources to develop a thriving energy sector and build a strong nation. The diversity and extent of our operations makes what we do critical to the Trinidad and Tobago economy. You'll find NGC integrally involved in community projects, bringing much-needed support to our arts, culture, and sport, and helping our young people to reach for the stars. NGC, our success story, is Trinidad and Tobago's. Welcome to Our Energy, Our Future, brought to you with the kind sponsorship of our platinum sponsor, the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago. This evening we have the pleasure of speaking with Kendall Lindsay, who is the Assistant Project Manager for the Liquid Fuel System of the NGC. He's going to talk to us about the Liquid Fuel Caroni facility. Welcome, Kendall. Long time no see. It's nice to see you again.
Same here. How you doing?
Fine, thanks. Tell us a bit about a description of this liquid fuel system and how it works. How important is it to the company and to Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, the system is designed really to replace the ships, the tankers that carry fuel currently from Petrotrinidad Point de Pierre to MP and sea lots.
Wow. A pretty
right?
vast network.
Yes. The whole system starts at Point de Pierre, where we have 4 tanks down there, and the fuel is shipped by underground pipeline to Caroni. At Caroni, we have storage tanks. There are 9 storage tanks for different fuels: jet fuel, the 2 gasolines, which we know are super and premium, and diesel. And that Caroni facility has a 7-day supply for uninterrupted deliveries during a national emergency. So that it is really a larger version of the MP Sea Lots facility. In addition to the tanks, we also have...
Sorry, before you go further and describe what you have in addition to the tanks, could you just tell us a little bit more about the Sea Lots facility, which is so close to Port of Spain?
The Sea Lots facility is a fairly old facility, and I believe it has 3 dispensing stations, what we call RTW loading racks. Those dispensing stations right now, they can turn around trucks, that's the RTW trucks, in about 40 minutes. The new facility will cut that time in half. In addition, the new facility has 14 stations, so you can load more trucks, and each truck can load in a shorter time. So we expect to turn around 14 trucks in about 20 minutes.
So they'll be experiencing significant cost and time savings.
Cost and time savings. Additionally, the new facility is also much more automated than the existing facility, so that the system of loading trucks will be a bit different. At the CDOS facility, there are operators who load the trucks that belong to MP operators. At the new facility, the truck drivers will be loading the trucks themselves, much like self-service in a fuel station, a gas station. The thing is that during shortages or perceived shortages of fuel, the public can be assured that there is enough supply in Caroni to adequately service the Trinidad. From Caroni, there's another underground pipeline that goes to Piarco, carrying jet fuel only, and that terminates in the current MP terminal at Piarco for jet service. So that the RTWs, road tank wagons that is, that carry fuel from Petrotrin to Piarco, jet fuel, those will become obsolete and put into other kinds of service.
So by way of a summary, the new liquid fuels facility from Caroni, with its distribution to other parts of the country, will cut down on the time and on the cost of ensuring that we have ready access to different types of fuel in the country.
And the security of supply.
Security of supply. We want to thank you very much for sharing that information with us, Mr. Lindsay, and wish you all the best in implementing the project as you move forward.
Thank you.
Thanks for staying with Making a Difference. You've been listening to Our Energy, Our Future. We've been talking with Kendall Lindsay, the Assistant Project Manager for the Liquid Fuel Caroni facility of NGC. Special thanks to our platinum sponsor, the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago, as they make a difference by educating the community about NGC's Liquid Fuel Caroni facility. We thank all those who participate in the Our Energy, Our Future quiz, changing each week according to the topic, and we invite you to take this week's quiz. Remember to select the correct answers in response to the questions posed, which you can take on our website, www.makingadifferenceforglobalharmony.com/NGC quiz. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back with Caribbean Economic Forum after a word from our platinum sponsors, the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago. For nearly 4 decades, the National Gas Company has been using our natural gas resources to develop a thriving energy sector and build a strong nation. The diversity and extent of our operations makes what we do critical to the Trinidad and Tobago economy. You'll find NGC integrally involved in community projects, bringing much-needed support to our arts, culture, and sport, and helping our young people to reach for the stars. NGC, our success story, is Trinidad and Tobago's. Welcome to Caribbean Economic Forum. This evening we have great pleasure in welcoming into the studio of Making a Difference, Ms. Fulade Mutota, who is the Executive Director of the Women's Institute for Alternative Development, which recently convened a CARICOM meeting on the United Nations Arms Trade Treaty, a very serious discussion. We want to welcome you into the studio, Ms. Mutota. Thanks very much for coming.
Thank you very much.
How did you get involved with the United Nations Arms Trade Treaty?
As a result of the work that we do on gun violence, since 2000, we began our work in terms of reducing and preventing armed violence. And what we found is that the reports or the evidence point to the fact that over 90% of the guns that end up in the illegal market, and therefore in our communities, actually start off in the illicit trade. So they are legitimate
In the
transfer
illicit trade.
in the illicit
Meaning
trade.
it's these are legal.
Meaning that it is legal. It's a legitimate transfer that happens between states, but very often the weapons are diverted.
How? By being stolen or being diverted from inside?
In very many
machinations.
ways. So that, for example, you may have a legitimate transfer that's happening between two countries. But you may also have people within the system who may exploit loopholes in the system because the processes that are used are not sufficiently robust to protect and to prevent the diversion of the weapons. Now, of course, when the weapons are diverted, they're diverted so that they could come into the illegal market. And naturally, when they come into the illegal market, a country like Trinidad and Tobago, and as we can see across CARICOM, our communities then are under siege. You also have another scenario in which the transfer has been made and it's all legitimate, but the holders of the weapons now, whether it's people in the armed forces, the security services, whatever have you, they themselves may find ways in which they filter the guns into the illegal market. So you have various scenarios. What the Arms Trade Treaty is intended to do is to block the loopholes, and it's and therefore the intention is multidimensional. In terms of the standards, the treaty will set international standards that will bind all governments, so that we all know that we have robust processes that must be followed in order for a transfer to occur. So that takes care of the standards that are important, because you do have very many countries that have really strong, impregnable almost standards.
But the countries that they're trading with
may
do
not,
or
and
may not.
therefore you can have the diversion. I'm going to quickly tell you some of the other things the treaty will do and then answer your question. The treaty will also cover the scope of the arms that will be controlled. So that, for example, as NGOs, we are saying all conventional arms, because we do not want to find ourselves in a situation where you select some and the others are not covered and they then become
okay, so it's going to be a comprehensive.
So it is going to be comprehensive in that sense, in that the scope is very wide. There's also the criteria to take into account, and we are saying that the treaty must ensure that if there is a risk, even minimal, that this transfer of arms will be used to abuse people's human rights, for example, or undermine sustainable development, then it should not occur. So what we're attempting to do is to develop a template that would allow an importing country and also an exporting country to go down the list of what is and what should not be before you can confirm or complete the transaction.
You'll find a lot of opposition from arms dealers and arms traders to this kind of comprehensive.
Well, naturally, you're correct. Naturally, we're having significant opposition from countries that do not want an arms trade treaty. This workshop that we just held in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, May 24th, 25th, is the third regional workshop that we've done. Since we began this work in 2006, the government of Trinidad and Tobago has been very progressive in terms of promoting the importance of getting a strong and robust, legally binding treaty. And so the first two meetings were held here, the third one was held in St. Vincent. And in that third workshop, the intention was to organize our negotiating position going into the negotiations in July, which the negotiation is July 2nd to 27th.
Are you able to speak to what that position is? We have about a minute.
Well, the position is that in terms of the scope of the treaty, CARICOM wants to ensure that we have small arms and light weapons in the treaty, as well as ammunition. Because as you know, for us in the region, firearms are the major source of misery, and therefore a treaty without small arms, which firearms are included in that definition, is not going to be useful for us.
Exactly.
So the negotiating position is small arms and light weapons and ammunition. We're also looking for component parts and technology, because I'm sure that you know better than I, at the rapid rate that technology is going, what we see before us today does not necessarily
have
mean
anything to do with tomorrow. So you're trying to be
we might as
futuristic
well,
in terms of what
as
of the
since we're
scope.
looking for a comprehensive treaty, we're trying to cover all the gaps.
Sister Folade, good luck.
Thank you very
Congratulations
much.
on the work you're doing. We hope that we'll
Appreciate
be
it.
able to hear from you about the outcomes, that the outcomes are positive and favorable to peace and nonviolence in the Caribbean. Stay with Making a Difference. Caribbean Economic Forum. We'll be back in just a few. For the best quality production of infomercials, advertisements, documentaries, and multimedia communications at the most competitive rates in the market, contact FM Advertising at info@makingadifferenceforglobalharmony.com or call 305-7532 or 4834-4046. Help ever, hurt never. Welcome back to Caribbean Economic Forum. We have a very fascinating discussion right now. In studio with us via Skype is Dr. Enrico Melson, MD. He is a graduate of Harvard University. We were classmates, in fact, roommates. He is also a graduate of the Harvard School of Public Health. He has his medical doctorate degree from Stanford, from University of California. He has also studied at the Sloan Kettering, and he has specialties in a number of disciplines, including cancer. Also joining us in studio, no stranger to us, David Frazier. And we're looking at the role of integrated medicine in public health policy, national public health policy. And in order to get an idea of, I'm going to ask Rico to start, Dr. Melson to start with a definition of what is meant by integrated medicine.
Well, unfortunately, it's not a very precise term. What it generally means is combining the different healthcare delivery, treatment, and prevention systems from different cultures around the world and different disciplines. How they are combined is very variable. Usually in the United States, though, now what we're seeing is we're seeing a wave of the teaching of integrative medicine in quite a number of the medical universities. Usually we're talking about the Western medicine, which is called allopathic, being combined with some form of Eastern medicine, for example, Chinese herbal medicine, acupuncture, Qigong energy medicine, Ayurveda from India, and many other more traditional systems that we know of, such as chiropractic medicine, homeopathy, naturopathic healing, body work of different types, and combining them in a way that would have the patient working very closely with the provider team rather than simply under the directive of a single practitioner like their MD physician.
As you were describing the discipline of integrative medicine, Dr. Melson, I saw Mr. Frazier's eyebrows raise in skepticism, but it's interesting to note that the skepticism that predominated in Western universities and medical schools, say 25 years ago, seems to have abated somewhat. While we mull on that concept, I would like now, Mr. Frazier, to invite you to speak to us about national public health policy and the economy, and then we'll get into a more interactive session.
Well, one of the key things we have to look at is the economic models that we create as we go forward. If we want to really achieve developed society status, we have to change from social to economic infrastructure, meaning that there must be recourse financing. It can't be that you get free healthcare. At the same time, you have to transform the public health system, and there are challenges in that public health system. For example, the personnel identified may not have the skills or the competencies, and if you're going to train them up over the next 10 years, would they be exiting the workforce by that time? And what new skills would they be bringing? Would they be on a learning curve, at 55 or 60? Or do we start with, importing the models into Trinidad, creating the public-private partnerships, training and developing the people, and as they go along, you have a transfer process that takes place where eventually there can be immersion between the local participation and the private participation and international partners. That's how I see it happening. While central government expenditure in the health sector has more than doubled in terms between the 2002 to 2009 period, it has been relatively constant as a percentage of recurrent expenditure.
What is it for 2010, 2011?
2010, it represents 6%.
How does that data, Dr. Melson, compare with in terms of you've practiced medicine all over the world? What would you say that those figures represent in relationship to the developed versus developing economies and societies in which you've been working?
Well, my overall sense is that they're probably relatively middle of the road. We know that healthcare around the world has been quite expensive, no matter what is its predominant discipline or tradition in terms of how it's organized and how it's provided. We know that healthcare itself, particularly from a governmental economic framework, is one of the most expensive components of any gross national budget. Of course, when we are busy building bombs and trying to invade countries, that's a different story. And we know that what we're calling security becomes a different level of priority in the military budgets, particularly of the developed countries of the world, but also in the undeveloped countries. When we set that off to the side, then we look at the other major elements of infrastructural investment, and those are education, health, and of course, food, transportation, these things.
Communications.
They're always quite expensive.
But the point that David is making, Rico, about the need to change the model of public health so that it is able to be sustainable. So in other words, the current model that predominates in Trinidad and Tobago is a public, where the state expenditure in public health goes into hospitals, it goes into training personnel. He gave a figure of 70%.
Let me identify what the priority challenges are. Data collection, analysis, management, always an issue in the public service. Health information systems, epidemiological surveillance, and the use of information for decision making. 2, the other area I see critical is human resource planning, right? While there's a need to increase the skill levels of providers in the sector, the current public health care system suffers from not having a health workforce that corresponds in quantity, competence, and quality to the current and projected needs of the population. I also see 3, institutional organization. That has to change. There's a need to strengthen the governance and institutional arrangements. And
You're talking about hospital and public health administration.
Public health administration. That's where you would have to get the competent, proven partners, maybe Stanford University, Johns Hopkins, Harvard Public Health Care, Sturm Catherine, all the providers. But these people are known for best practices worldwide in terms of managing healthcare systems, and we may need to partner with such people. 4, health financing. The sector is constrained by funding shortfalls, which is affecting both planning and service delivery functions. So in my opinion, I think there's need to establish a sustainable health financing model for the health sector. It has to be sustainable financing because you can't build it, it's state of the art, and it opens tomorrow morning and it has no money to manage it.
All right, good. Thank you for those points of, what do you think of those points of priority in developing national health policy, Dr. Melson? And as you comment, reflect also on the integrated approach to health.
Yes, I think there's secondary issues. Okay, so I just want to start off from that point of view. We're talking about how to pay for a system that itself is inherently dysfunctional and moribund. Just because we call on Harvard University or Stanford or Sloan Kettering or the National Institutes of Health of the United States, we know that the healthcare system, we know that medicine as it is taught and as it is practiced with the hegemony of the allopathic regime, we know that that is already a grossly dysfunctional model. So if simply the issue is emphasizing how to pay for the implementation and the sustainability of this model as it is disseminated throughout the world, it is just a hand down to the developing economies of the world of that which is only going to further exacerbate the load upon their national budgets.
So what should be the priority if it's secondary?
And it is not to yield what we're supposed supposed to be about? What it's supposed to be about is health. So let us talk. First, we have to understand there's two different issues here. One is the quality of health of the population of a country. The other is the mechanism of structured operations and delivery of services that are intended, or at least supposed to be intended, to increase and improve the health of the population of the country.
Explain what you mean by that, Dr. Melson, and if you can answer the question regarding where models are that we can look at as templates, then please do so.
No, I wasn't looking at Ayurvedic medicine and all that. Huh? I'm not looking at that at all. As a matter of fact, that is not even a discussion I want to have.
No, but you asked him where does public health actually produce improved health? That was the question. So let him answer that question and come back to your point. Go ahead. Sorry, Rico.
I think that this discussion is heading in one direction, Felipe. I'm not a radical. So,
I know you're not a radical, but you asked a question.
I'm not here to get into radical ideologies on healthcare.
You asked a question. What we're trying to do now is answer the question.
All right,
if you have another point to make, you can make it. Go ahead, Rico.
If we're going to talk about health, the health of the population, that is one thing. It appears to me that that's not really the issue of the discussion here. The discussion here, apparently, which is not what I had agreed to speak on, however, I'm willing to do so. It appears to me that the discussion is more an issue of economics around health policy, around what we consider to be the prevailing standard of healthcare delivery systems. That being the case, it is not so much an issue of the discussion of integrative medicine. I will attempt as best I can then to respond to Mr. Frazier's comments. With respect to the issue of the workforce, I believe that one of the big issues within the healthcare delivery system that is really important for cost containment in terms of paying for, sustaining the system and those who are the implementers of the system would be attention given to a policy wherein those who are the workers and the representatives and the very mechanics of delivery of that particular system should, in the very least, embody the values of that system. Unfortunately, in the United States, that's often not the case, and I've seen it not so much the case also in many other countries. For example, nurses. There's often a large percentage of nurses who are themselves quite overweight, who are still smokers, who still have many health problems themselves, and yet they
not just nurses, doctors.
Yes, but especially in terms of nurses. I will speak on the doctors' issues. The doctors, yes, the administrators throughout the case. Yet the nurses especially are the ones who are most directly intersecting and interfacing with the patients, much more so than the doctors do. And yet you will often see the nurses take a smoker's break, when they have a chance, and they're out there on the side or even in the front of the hospital. The doctors who are obese, the doctors who themselves are embodying illness rather than health. The same thing within the political circles of health and finance in the United States. So one of the things I think that's really important in terms of implementing this approach that has an additional layer or dimension of integrity as it interfaces with the perceptions of the general population would be to consider what does it take to make sure that our people who are delivering our workforce, our people who are delivering healthcare are themselves true
healthy
examples of good health. That's one thing. Another thing would be examining what are some of the statistics that show where along that trajectory of delivery of service, that spectrum of delivery of services, do we see the most radical increases in cost? And increases in cost, for example, in the terminal stage of life, when we're looking at intensive care, highly expensive interventions with yet diminishing marginal returns.
In other words, when you say that, in other words, lower chances of survival.
Lower chances of survival and lower chances of true improvement in health. We have to look at...
So what do we do there? We leave them to die?
I'm sorry?
He said, what do we do there? Do we leave them to die?
Do we unplug them?
No, we don't. We don't leave them to die. And unfortunately, this has been some of the bastardization of on the political front in the United States from the debate in the last 3 years. What we really can do is we can look at additional ways to provide meaningful services.
First of all, I completely disagree with what Enrico is proposing, because everyone that attempted or attempts to
Excuse me,
implement...
I didn't get a chance to propose it. I didn't get a chance to propose it because you interrupted and you misrepresented what I said.
All right,
now,
I'm
not
sorry.
Here to debate.
I'm sorry if I'm here to
discussion. I thought this was a discussion.
All right.
Rather than debate.
All right. But what
Just
I'm
wanna-
saying is that we have 5 leading causes of death in Trinidad. I can't see him on the screen now. We have 5 leading causes of death in Trinidad. And those problems have been around, not today. They have been around for the last 20 years.
What are the 5 leading causes?
Heart disease,
Cardiovascular failure.
diabetes, malignant neoplasms or cancer, cerebrovascular disease, and HIV/AIDS. How do we approach these issues? We have to have a pragmatic approach. We need to adopt best practices to ensure that we can fund and be able to sustain the demands that will come on our health system. There are cultural patterns of consumption in Trinidad, and he's correct in terms of how do you get people to lead healthier lives. But I don't think that public education alone by itself is going to work in the short term.
Okay, thank you.
It's going to be a long-term
So you're seeing the 5 causes, leading causes of mortality, death from illness in the country. You said you were interrupted, Rico. So, okay, we apologize for interrupting you. Now that we have the information as far as what is killing the population from disease, the approach in terms of the public policy with an integrated method, could you speak to that in terms of the proposal?
Yes, yes. First of all, I share Mr. Frazier's concern about these areas. These are rather generic in terms of countries that are on paths of development, and they become increasingly the predominant categories for causes of death.
Lifestyle diseases.
Yes, they also become either directly or indirectly part of the most expensive categories in terms of the drain or the challenge to the financial dimension of healthcare systems and healthcare services delivery. What they also all share in common is that they are especially preventable categories. They are preventable through education in a very large degree. And yes, as Mr. Frazier says, not solely from the standpoint of education. There must be intervention, yes. And there must be the kind of infrastructure in place to deliver the medicinals and the other therapies that are necessary. I would caution, however, with respect to the use of this term, best practices. Best practices is quite often not best practices. Best practices is a term that is used internationally and increasingly so. And yet it does not address, for many reasons, it does not address what are often most relevant for the patient and the relationship between the patient and the provider of care. In the case of these categories, if we were to consider, and this is always the difficulty when you're at a public policy level, trade-offs because there are limited resources. But where there is a greater investment in education and prevention, sometimes at the cost of a modest restriction in interventional technology and medicinally oriented services, there is a greater gain. In other words,
let me see if I can, okay, in other words.
If we look on the front end, how to prevent more of these things from occurring,
Front end first.
as opposed to
back
after
end.
they have occurred and become quite expensive and quite difficult to actually reverse.
In common parlance, we would say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
That has been shown to be the case basically around the world when it comes to public health. Public health, and in many systems, public health is kept separate from the medical system, the medical services delivery system, They obviously need to be much more in harmony with one another. It's just that also public health has many other softer costs that go into education, that go into hygiene and sanitation, that go into transportation and food, for example. So they distribute more across the larger table, so to speak, of national concerns and national resource obligations than what is more defined within the medical care sector itself.
I see Fraser shaking his head like he's agreeing with you now, Rico.
Thank you.
I agree with
mean,
him now because he's off of the Ayurvedic stuff, you know.
He was afraid of Ayurveda.
Yeah, Ayurveda or whatever it's called.
All right. So, okay, we've got a few minutes left that we want to try and to tighten up the message, the educational message for the public that's viewing this program, because this is really, and the elements are twofold. One is how do we take preventative measures to improve our health as individuals? And then also, how does the system itself try to prioritize prevention? Since even though it may be more difficult because it's spread out over a wider array of where you invest your money, education, nutrition, etc., hygiene, that's been spoken to. Now, just before we go, I remember back in a long time ago, about 1989, right here in this studio, Dr. Melson and I did the first telemedical experiment in Trinidad and Tobago between south to south between doctors in Trinidad and Tobago and doctors in Tanzania. You remember that, Rico? Project SHARE, Satellites for Health and Rural Education. And at the time, we were looking at the incidences of diabetes, I think was one of them, waterborne diseases, and HIV/AIDS, which was a new disease at the time. And we were looking at how this process of communication could facilitate education and improve public health. Is that still something that is relevant? I'll start with you, David, and then we got about 2 minutes left, and then Rico to conclude.
Well, I don't want to get to this. I don't want to discuss public education because people believe that it's an advertisement in a newspaper, and really, what you have to be engaging in is something called behavior change strategy and programs. Behavior change is something you have to accept. All right, people over 40, 50, 60, it's difficult to change those behaviors. Certain people are able to transcend. It depends on their education and developmental background, kinds of parenting models they had, and so on. But by and large, in countries like Trinidad, developing countries, people at that age, 80, 90% of them, in my opinion, are resistant to change.
So what should the focus be, in your opinion?
Well, behavior change starts with children, but you have to have some sort of back-end strategy. In other words, as he said, front-end. Back-end strategy means you need to have very tight penalties. The insurance costs, for example, should penalize much more heavily persons who lead bad lifestyles, like smokers and persons who consume large amounts of alcohol. And there should be sanction along the way so that they will be forced to change their lifestyles. So if you didn't make the changes when you were young and you get older and you get these diseases as a result of this,
all right.
But then there's a back-end strategy. But more so, when you're looking at the public health system, it cannot remain in its present state. And I think the government is addressing that. They're looking at radical reforms, which I agree with.
Rico, final word on this question of the where we should be concentrating our emphasis to get the public health policy right.
Yes. When you want your child of 5 years of age to be weighing what you used to weigh when you were 25 years of age, perhaps we need to examine how we approach education on the front end. When we see that people are now dropping dead of heart attacks in their 30s because they have grown up on McDonald's and Burger King as signs of advancement of their society towards the American and the UK standards.
Well, we can't,
when we see instead more and more of the violence and the unrestrained sexual activities now creating more illness within our youth, when we see that we have lost that desire to learn about anything, to understand anything, when Trinidad has lost its status in the Western institutions as a country that could generate so many scholars because they had so much value set on education as the way of advancement. Instead, it becomes more hip hop and gangster rap and things of this nature. The counterculture becomes what our youth are known for. Then what we are seeing now is only the tip of the next series of icebergs of that which will devastate whatever is the national payment policy for this so-called best standard system that we are looking to implement. We must turn to education with a far greater awareness and willingness to radicalize the education process, to radicalize through empowerment, that we are here to be alive and healthy. That is our right. And as governments and as payment mechanisms and as infrastructural systems of delivery, we must deliver upon that promise that people understand. Their behavior is changed through understanding.
Okay, I think we're about to run out.
Which is truth, and they understand that which is health. We work together for that. That is what is a unified system, not simply the health system, but a unified system that the government and private sector in proper partnership, and I agree with Mr. Frazier, in proper partnership can do that is optimal for all of the society.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Dr. Enrico Melson,
Thank you
for
very much.
your passion and commitment to health. It's been a lifelong one. Thank you very much, David Frazier, for coming on and for discussing in a heated manner at times something that is critical to all of us, our health. Health is wealth. We'll be back after these messages. Thank you very much. Welcome back to Caribbean Economic Forum. What do small arms trading and entertainment have in common? We're going to find out. We have in studio the pleasure of welcoming Mr. Stephen Howard, who is the Executive Director, the CEO of Ask Promotions. Stephen, welcome to Making a Difference.
Thank you.
So what do these two things have in common?
A lot in common, because a lot of young people are the users of small arms and so on. And it is because of the drug trade that we have in the Caribbean, especially in Trinidad and Tobago, that has propelled young people who have taken a liking, as it were, to go that way, use firearms, stick up people, rob, engage in the drug trade in various aspects. And it is because they don't see opportunities. They may not be well schooled, they may not have been from the best backgrounds. And these are the young people who more often than not have the capacity to do extremely well in the creative industries and the entertainment industry specifically.
Beautiful bridge. Tell us about Ask Promotions and how you're making a difference with diverting young people who might be heading into trouble, who may be at risk, who may not have the value systems, the support systems to assist them to succeed in life. What do you guys do?
Well, basically, for instance, I am, from my background, I am involved with the St. Augustine Chamber Orchestra for the last 10 years as the vice chairman. Mm-hmm. And I have seen our organization grow from 23 young people to last September I put on stage at Napa like 350 children.
Wow. And these are young people playing
symphonic instruments, strings and so on.
Violin, cello.
Violin, cellos, the oboe, the timpani. There's a discipline that comes from playing those instruments. And children are able to take that into the other aspects of their lives. A lot of the great artists and performers, musicians, they all have a classical background. You need to learn music.
To read music.
You need to read, to be able to interpret, to read music, to understand the history of music. Last year, Ask Promotions and ArcelorMittal was the only two Caribbean countries to have won the BID Award in Geneva.
What's the BID Award?
The BID Awards is based on innovation and so on in your particular
So how did you do that? Describe that.
Well, it was based on our approach to the music industry. One of the things that we do, we attend conferences internationally. We have been able to build networks with major industry players.
You're talking about with orchestral music?
This is general music. This is outside of orchestral music.
So tell us what other genres you present in Ask.
We do gospel music. We are doing, gospel is one of the major things.
When you say we do it, you produce it?
We have produced records. Marshall Montano presented at the CIF about 2-3 weeks ago.
CIF?
Yes, the Caribbean Investment Forum. And Marshall Montano, our biggest star, said, finally, he has gone to LA and hired a manager because we don't have those kinds of expertise. He has gone to LA because he needs to be closely entwined with the writers. Where in Trinidad can I go and learn to write properly? We don't have industry organizations, so where are the Engineers Association? The thing about it is that from where we stand, we have seen, because of our involvement in producing and managing artists, we have seen that there is a need to ensure that people understand all these various aspects of the industry. The copyright. When you produce, how do you produce? How do you set about, okay, I'm going to do a release. Where do I do a release for the particular genre of music? It's lacking.
So does your interest also include Pan, Kaiso, our indigenous music?
Every single genre of music we are interested in. And this conference that we are having, the 19th to the 23rd at Queen's Hall, is going to take into consideration all that. We're going to have showcasing nightly at 51 Degrees and at Queen's Hall. So you can showcase in front of these active music executives
who should attend this conference?
Everyone who's involved in the creation of music. So if you're a songwriter, if you're a singer, if you're a producer, if you're an engineer, if you're a musician, just come on down. If you are a manager, one of the things that we are hoping to launch is the Artist Managers Association of Trinidad and Tobago. It's lacking.
Entertainment is seen as one of the pillars of diversification of the economy. In a nutshell, in a soundbite for the audience, why and how do you think that can be accomplished? Because there's been a lot of talk about it. You seem to be getting closer to the holy grail of integration of the different components that make it happen.
One, in Trinidad and Tobago, we have a capacity for quality talent. It has to be showcased, it has to be harnessed, managed. We can get a lot of young people going out, being readied. I was asked, Stephen, tell us how many more artists you have ready to get on the international stage. People are looking, Rihanna and Nicki Minaj. It's not by accident. These people, they want to come because we have what they call the Caribbean swag. And they're coming here. I'm saying
they're from here in the beginning anyway.
But what I'm saying, the music executives are coming here because they have seen the Caribbean has something that the world is pandering to.
So we need to then, you're saying, get organized. Officialdom needs to be paying attention to the entertainment sector. The youth need to say, hey, this is a viable alternative to gangsters. And there was a group in Pity Valley called Valleywood. They say, act it, don't do it. In other words, use your talent to perform rather than get involved in antisocial and unproductive activity. Stephen Howard, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much,
Keep up the good
Felipe.
work. Good luck with Ask Promotions.
Thanks.
You've been watching Making a Difference, Caribbean Economic Forum. Stay with us. We'll be back after these messages. For the best quality production of infomercials, advertisements, documentaries, and multimedia communications at the most competitive rates in the market, contact FM Advertising at info@makingadifferenceforglobalharmony.com or call 305-7532 or 4834-4046. Help ever, hurt never.